I want to tell you what a great thing Nuance did and what Callie led. A vast number of organizations in the United States use Nuance, and we depend upon it. That's how our physicians communicate with the EMR. And the work that they put in, it definitely impacted us. We basically had to shut down all of our Nuance products because of the problems that they were having as a company. But they responded incredibly quickly. They were honest with us, and I just want to say thank you. What a great deal. I've been a CIO for 14 years at Intermountain Healthcare in Salt Lake City, Utah. Prior to that, I spent 23 years as a consultant. I worked for Deloitte and Ernst & Young, and all of it was in healthcare and it was in IT. And I got to tell you, I love information technology. I love the things that have happened. I remember working on my old System 34 when we started that most of you don't even know what it is. But look at the way things have changed. And it probably had enough power to match the calculator app on my iPhone. Not much power. Look at how things have changed. I think it's amazing, and I love the concept of innovation. Because really that's what we do as technologists. We innovate all the time because all these things are so new. Edison said, "There's a way to do it better, find it." I mean, how neat is it? Look at how things have changed. Who would have thought that photography would be gone? Film would be gone and it would now all become digitized. Who would have thought that the x-rays that we used to have, the neat little lights that we'd shine behind, would all become digitized and instantly accessed by clinicians wherever they required it? Who would have thought that I could get on an airplane in Atlanta, Georgia, and fly all the way to Mumbai, India, in one flight without stopping? Who would have thought that that airplane probably flew itself all the way across the world? Probably landed itself as well. Who'd have thought that you wouldn't need a driver in your car anymore because the autonomous vehicle's out there? Now, I think that's really cool, although I'm pretty sure I've been on the streets here in Mumbai. That's not going to work. But who would have thought all these things? There's a better way to do things, and isn't that what innovation's all about? We need to go search and find those better ways. You know, in healthcare, we've always been innovative. That's why they call it the practice of medicine. It isn't the science, although there is lots of science in medicine, but it's really the practice of medicine because we're learning things all the time. All through history, we have been innovating in healthcare. Makes it a pretty exciting field to be in, and why I'm so glad to be part of the healthcare revolution. We've been innovating in healthcare since prehistoric times. We have evidence on the caves of prehistoric people who did something called tree panning, where they actually bored a hole in the skull of the patient, or the victim probably in that instance, but of those people to help with things like headaches or things like epileptic kind of seizures. They used this concept called tree panning all the way in prehistoric times. By the way, the concept still lives today. It's a little more scientific. It's a little better done, but the concept still exists. Think about Egypt and the things they did in Egypt around innovation. First of all, that is the first really noted time when we had female physicians. And they were not just female physicians, they led healthcare in Egypt. They were the people that were come to provide care. But they had specialties, all different kinds of specialties. Specialties around the foot, specialties around the digestive system. They had specialties in many, many areas in Egypt. Innovation happening in healthcare. Well, y'all would be familiar, or you all would be familiar with the center one, Ayurveda, which I'm sure I didn't say right, but if I go anywhere else in the world, I can say it and I'll get away with it. But here I probably don't. But think of the innovations that happened around medicine. Literally hundreds, if not thousands of medicines that were developed, many of them homeopathic, but still medicines that were directed towards certain cures within the body. They came up with books and books still used today in how to provide care. Yeah, we've been innovating in healthcare for a long time. Hippocrates, every physician, I don't know if it's around the world, but certainly every physician in the United States takes the Hippocratic Oath. That goes back to Hippocrates. But he didn't only come up with an oath, he actually mapped out the human chest, the lungs, and the heart, came up with some of the original surgeries on how to care for the heart and the lung. Over time, we've innovated greatly in healthcare. And then Muslim care. The eye, they have very good records of the eye and how the eye could be operated upon and improved, and diseases of the eyes could be improved. Many, many areas of care. And really an interesting thing that came out of the Muslim population in leadership and physicians was the concept of hospitals. And then that concept went from the Middle East, and now it's everywhere in the world. We have been incredibly innovative in healthcare. Again, makes it a great field for us to be in. So why? Why should we bother innovating? Well, let me give you some ideas. 56% of the world's population does not have adequate access to care. How can that happen? We have networks and wireless. We can literally touch with a cell phone almost every square inch of this world. Yet 56% of the population doesn't have access to adequate care. 15% of the US population, by the way, it's almost a $2 trillion industry in the United States. $2 trillion, yet 15% of that population doesn't have adequate access to health care. And in Utah, where I live, the population of about 3 million. I think that's like 4 city blocks in Mumbai. But 3 million people live in the state of Utah. 12% don't have adequate access to care. Now let me give you a little thought about that. We have a building, our building's 26 stories high. If you go to the top story of that building and you look east, you're looking toward a mountain range. It's called the Wasatch Mountain. It's kind of the upper class, the nicer area of Salt Lake City. If you look out that direction, you're going to see one zip code, one place where mail is delivered to. And they're going to have a mortality rate. Not a bad mortality rate, but if you walk across the building, simply turn around and look west out of our building, you're going to see another zip code and another small neighborhood and area. The difference in mortality rate between looking east and looking west, 10 years. How can that be in a country where arguably we have one of the better healthcare systems in the United States, but still we don't have adequate access to care? Why innovate? This doesn't seem right. That's not taking care of people. And so we have an opportunity to improve. Why innovate? $134. This is back in 1950. If you come to today, that same $134 per person cost for care is now almost $9,000. 6,500% increase in the cost of care in the United States. One thing, that is not sustainable. If you look at what we're getting paid to provide care, that curve's now going down in the United States. Probably a good thing when you look at this chart. But the cost to provide that care is an opposite graph. And those lines have crossed. And now in the United States, we see lots of hospitals that can no longer stay in business. They don't make enough money to keep their doors open. Well, that's just going to increase the gap that I showed in the last chart of not having access to the proper amount of care. The costs of care are going up at such a rapid pace. So, opportunities to innovate, opportunities to improve. I would venture to say in this room, there is at least one great idea that if it was taken to its potential, could save tens of millions of dollars in the provision of health care. Why innovate? Because those opportunities are there, and I know they exist in this room today. I want you to imagine for a second, oops, went too far. It's a Friday night, 12:18 p.m. Your 4-year-old son has an earache. Now, you've been a parent, you've probably had 2 or 3 other children, and you know that earache is likely otitis media, because your kids have it all the time. It's a pretty common disease. You also know how to care for that. You need a good antibiotic to take care of this particular otitis media. You know what it is, but what are your options today in the United States? You can go, if it's not in the middle of the night, you can go see your doctor, but if it's in the middle of the night, you can go to an emergency room, where there's likely about 50 other people sitting in the emergency room with about 50 other diseases your son doesn't currently have, but now will get exposed to. Those are your options, right, in care. Maybe you can get on the phone if you're related to a doctor and have them phone in a prescription. Well, We had a good presentation earlier today about telemedicine and some of the things that are happening telemedicine. But the solution here, we now have dozens of them. We have digital health where we can communicate instantly with a physician and we can take care of those people, and they don't have to come into the ED. They can get instant care. We don't incur all the cost of having someone come to the emergency department, and we can get our children, in this instance, better quicker. We can also provide lots of care throughout our network of hospitals where we no longer have to send specialists, but we can do it through telemedicine. Imagine for a second, there's a surgeon in London, England, who has developed a new procedure for lung transplants. Pretty difficult procedure, correct? And he's having amazing results. Now imagine you have a friend in Los Angeles that has fibrosis of the lung and needs a lung transplant. Wouldn't you want the knowledge that exists in London, England, to exist in Los Angeles for your friend? You would. Now imagine that things like virtual reality can happen, where that physician in London can actually instruct the physician in Los Angeles on how to do things. Using virtual reality, seeing, tactile, feeling what's going on in a surgery, and actually take and train that procedure almost instantaneously. Now, your friend's getting the same benefit of the knowledge that was gained in London, England. Imagine your daughter is diagnosed with a urinary tract infection, is in the emergency room at some hospital, and is prescribed an antibiotic. 2 days later, you find out that antibiotic or 2 days later, the microbiology results come through and find out that that antibiotic wasn't effective with the particular strain that your daughter had. Well, so today what would happen? Your daughter would go home, you would wait 2 days, she's taking the wrong medication, not getting better. And then 2 days later, if you're lucky, and if the doctor sees it and makes the phone call, well, then we can switch the antibiotic. More likely what's going to happen is in 4 or 5 days, your daughter is going to call up, or you're going to call up and say, this isn't working. Then they'll go back and they'll look at the microbiology results and they'll say, oh yeah, it didn't come out right, and we'll prescribe a new medication. Imagine now that we have things like artificial intelligence. Imagine that we have a virtual care coordination process where all the results are coming together, and the artificial intelligence is able to align those results, and the minute that microbiology result comes in, it understands it, and it sends a notification to you, your daughter, and your physician, and we can immediately get her on the right antibiotic, days before she's starting to heal and become better. All these technologies exist. All these are great innovations that really make it exciting to be in healthcare. You know, real success is not achieving greatness, although it's okay to achieve greatness. By the way, it's okay to make money as well. But real success is not achieving greatness. Rather, real success is achieving greatness that benefits many people. Real success raises all ships. That's the beauty I see in healthcare and innovation in healthcare. Let me close by telling you a story. The girl on the screen is named Heather. Heather is my daughter. In 2006, we learned that Heather had leukemia. Weren't really familiar with it, but we went ahead and went forward and took care of Heather and took her into Primary Children's Hospital. We went through a whole protocol for what she had for her leukemia, and about 4 months later, she was clean. She no longer had leukemia for about 14 months, and then the leukemia came back. So we went back into the hospital, went through a new protocol which involved a bone marrow transplant, and it was perfect. My son was a perfect match. Heather was, again, relieved of the problems of leukemia. 12 months after she grafted into the new bone marrow, we went to the physician. The physician said, there's a 2% chance that she'll ever have leukemia again. That was pretty cool, until 3 months later when the leukemia came back. Heather lived for 2 weeks, and then she was taken because of an infection that came into her system for the treatment of leukemia. If Heather was diagnosed today, she'd live, because there's been so much innovation around this particular leukemia and the things that she was dealing with. Why should we innovate? Because in my case, we could have saved my daughter. Why should we innovate? Because it's not right that 56% of the population doesn't have adequate access to care. None of those things are right. So why innovate? Because it's our responsibility to innovate. Thank you.